For nearly 2 hours, the room felt calm in the way only power feels calm when it believes nothing can touch it, and Gavin Newsom sat there like a man who thought the day already belonged to him, his posture relaxed, his answers smooth, his tone steady, moving from topic to topic as if following a map he had memorized weeks ago. Climate plans, health programs, housing goals, all delivered with the same clean rhythm, the kind meant for cameras, donors, and future campaign clips, and around him. The signs were good, friendly faces, nodding heads, quiet approval, staffers typing without stress, reporters half listening because nothing surprising was happening. This was routine, this was safe, this was the kind of hearing that fades into background noise, and that was the point, because nothing builds confidence like a room that stops questioning you, and Newsom could feel it, that sense that he was not being tested but displayed, that he was not defending but presenting, and every soft question pushed that feeling further. Every polite exchange reinforced the idea that this was his stage and everyone else was just moving through it, and if you were watching closely you could see how comfortable he had become, the small smiles, the smooth pauses, the way his hands rested like nothing unexpected could happen, and this comfort was not accidental, it was built on years of practice, on knowing how to speak without saying too much, on knowing how to stretch answers just long enough to sound full without becoming clear. And it worked because most people let it work, they listen, they nod, they move on, and in that space between words and meaning, power stays safe. But not everyone in the room was playing along, because several seats away sat John Kennedy, quiet, still, barely moving, not leaning forward, not checking his phone, not whispering to aides, just watching. And the longer the hearing went on, the more noticeable that stillness became, not because he demanded attention but because he refused to perform, and that kind of quiet is different. It doesn't fade, it waits, and while Newsom spoke about plans and progress and long-term vision, Kennedy listened without reacting, as if the words were not new to him, as if he had already heard them somewhere else, read them somewhere else, measured them against something solid, and the room didn't notice at first because calm is contagious, and confidence spreads quickly when no one challenges it. But then the moment came when the chair shifted the floor, when the routine handoff of questions moved to Kennedy. And nothing seemed different at first, no raised voice, no sharp tone, no sudden change, just a microphone adjusted, a folder opened, and one sentence spoken plainly, without anger, without drama, without attack, a sentence so simple it didn't sound dangerous, and that was exactly why it landed, because it wasn't wrapped in opinion or insult or long setup, it was a clean question tied to a clear number, and when it was asked the room changed in a way people feel before they understand. Pause that lasted half a second too long, a silence that no one rushed to fill, and for the first time that day Newsom didn't answer right away. His eyes flicked down, then back up, as if searching for the right door in a hallway he suddenly didn't recognize, and that pause, small as it was, mattered more than any raised voice ever could, because silence on camera is loud, and silence after a simple question sounds like confusion, and the audience, both in the room and far beyond it, felt that shift, even if they couldn't explain it yet. Because this was no longer a performance moving forward on schedule, this was a moment where the script had slipped, and when Newsom began to answer, the words came slower, not wrong, not broken, but softer around the edges, and Kennedy didn't interrupt, didn't argue, didn't react, he just waited, and waiting is powerful when the other person is trying to regain balance, and by the time Newsom finished that first response, something had already cracked, not enough to shatter the image, but enough to let doubt in, enough to remind the room that confidence depends on control, and control depends on questions staying predictable, and this one hadn't, and from that point on the hearing was no longer about what Newsom wanted to say, it was about what he could answer, and that is a very different position to stand in when cameras are rolling. And silence has already spoken once. After that first moment, the hearing didn't explode, it tightened, like a rope pulled slowly instead of snapped, and Kennedy kept his tone calm, his pace slow, moving from topic to topic with the same steady pattern, asking about people leaving the state, not in big dramatic terms, but in plain numbers, who left, how many, over what time, and each question followed the same shape, short, clear, hard to dodge without sounding vague, and Newsom answered the way leaders often do when pressed, by adding context, by widening the frame, by talking about trends and reasons and complexity, and none of that sounded unreasonable. But it didn't land the way it had earlier, because once a room senses hesitation, every long answer starts to feel like a path around something instead of toward it, and Kennedy didn't argue those answers, he didn't say they were lies, he didn't raise his voice, he simply brought out another sheet, another number, another point that had already been reported and discussed in public, and that repetition did the work, because when different problems start pointing in the same direction, viewers stop seeing them as separate issues, they start seeing a pattern, and that pattern became clearer as the topics moved on: cost of living, energy bills, business moves, each one framed not as an attack but as a question tied to everyday impact, and the language stayed simple on purpose, no deep policy talk, no heavy terms, just the basic idea that when life costs more, people notice; when companies leave, people ask why; and when leaders talk about success while those pressures grow, the gap between words and reality gets harder to ignore. And Newsom tried to close that gap with confident tone and practiced phrasing, but the rhythm was gone, the smooth flow broken by small pauses, tiny breaks where his answers seemed to search for footing, and the cameras caught it all, not because he looked angry or weak, but because he looked careful now, and care on. Camera often reads as caution, and caution after confidence reads as retreat, and the room responded in small ways, reporters typing faster, staffers leaning forward, the soft noise level rising and falling as each new question landed. And then Kennedy shifted the focus again, away from policy charts and toward money spent and results seen, still careful, still measured, still tied to public records, and this was where the tension sharpened, because money is concrete, numbers tied to budgets don't float the way promises do, and when results don't match spending, people feel that mismatch even if they don't know every detail, and Kennedy's questions stayed in that space: where did it go, what changed, what can people point to now that they couldn't before? And Newsom answered with effort, with references to programs and plans and time needed, and none of it sounded careless, but it didn't sound final either, and that mattered, because the longer the exchange went on, the more it felt like Kennedy wasn't trying to win an argument, he was building a picture piece by piece, and every piece fit the same frame: big plans, big spending, unclear results. And when the focus moved to trust, to moments people remembered outside charts and hearings, the tone in the room shifted again, because trust doesn't need numbers to survive, it needs belief, and when belief cracks, facts rush in to fill the space. And Kennedy's question there wasn't about one event, it was about why that event stayed in people's minds, why it became a symbol, why it stuck. And Newsom pushed back, defended himself, explained the moment, and again, none of that sounded reckless, but it sounded defensive, and defense is not where leaders want to be when they are trying to look ready for something bigger. And by now the audience at home could feel the arc even if they didn't follow every detail. This was no longer a hearing drifting toward a quiet close, this was a slow turning point, where one calm question had opened the door for many others, and each answer, instead of sealing that door, kept it open just wide enough for doubt to walk through. And Kennedy never needed to step forward aggressively because the space was already there, created by the contrast between early confidence and later caution, between smooth delivery and measured defense, and that contrast told the story on its own, without anyone needing to say it out loud. When the hearing finally moved toward its end, the energy in the room was no longer controlled. It was restless, like everyone knew something important had happened but no one could quite name the exact moment it became unavoidable, and Kennedy closed his folder the same calm way he had opened it, without triumph, without a smile, as if the work was done not because he had won but because the questions had been asked and left where they landed. And Newsom sat there for a beat longer than before. His face steady but tight, aware now that the day had not gone the way it was meant to, and as people stood, chairs scraped, voices rose, the noise rushed back in, and that return of chaos only made the earlier silences feel heavier in memory, because silence is what people replay, silence is what gets clipped and shared, and it didn't take long for that to happen. Short videos spreading online, not of shouting or insults, but of pauses, of simple questions followed by careful answers, of a leader who looked prepared until the moment preparation wasn't enough, and analysts on screens later would debate what it meant, whether it changed anything, whether it was fair, whether it mattered in the long run. But those debates missed the core reason the moment spread so fast: it felt real, unscripted, human, and audiences respond to that more than polish, because polish reminds them of ads and speeches, while hesitation reminds them of truth, and the sentence that started it all didn't become famous because it was clever, it became famous because it was clear, and clarity cuts through noise in a way volume never can, and for Newsom the aftermath was quieter than the hearing itself. No big statement, no dramatic counter, just time passing with questions hanging in the air, and for Kennedy there was no victory speech either, just a simple line repeated when asked about it, that facts don't need anger to hurt, they just need space to be heard, and that idea stuck because it explained what people had watched without turning it into a show, and whether or not it truly ended any future plans was something only time would decide, but the damage to the image of control was already done, because once viewers see a leader caught between confidence and uncertainty, they remember that moment more than any speech that came before it, and that is why the hearing didn't fade like so many others, why it stayed in feeds and conversations, why that one sentence carried so much weight, not because it destroyed anything on its own, but because it revealed how thin the line can be between looking ready and being tested, and in the end that was the real story, not a shouting match, not a public takedown, but a reminder that power depends on unanswered questions staying quiet, and the moment one of them is asked clearly, calmly, and in front of everyone, the future can start to bend in ways no script can fully control.